So this morning we have a 2012 F150 XLT, and the MIL has been reported to be on. Of course, it's on now because it's key on, engine off, but it's on constantly. Now the customer also said it was shuddering, like it had a misfire. He did not report the check engine light as flashing, as far as I know. But we're going to throw this scan tool on it here and have a look at any fault codes that are in history. So I've scanned this vehicle before, and I changed the coil on it a few months ago and put a set of plugs in it at that time. And I think if we'll check the history here to see if there's a related failure. It's a 5-liter. And I'm just going to go straight into the engine instead of doing a network scan here and just see what codes it's got. Memory codes. Heater circuit on the oxygen sensor, heater circuit, random misfire detected, cylinder 2 misfire detected, cylinder 4 misfire detected. Misfire detected on startup, and O2 sensor negative current output circuit bank 1. Well, we're going to have to look at some of the freeze frame data for this. It'll be interesting to see which one it logged the freeze frame on. And we're going to look at mode 6 data to see if we can tell which cylinder had been misfiring. Under generic functions, freeze frame data, watch, it'll be one of the O2 sensor codes. Unfortunately, this Ford is only going to support one freeze frame. Good, it recorded it on the random misfire. Long-term fuel trim on both banks is reasonable. Was it even in closed loop? It was out 91 Celsius, so it was at operating temperature. 4,280 RPM, so it was actually running pretty hard at that time. Calculated load value 100%, so obviously they had their foot in this thing when it recorded that random misfire. You had accelerator pedals only 38, 31, 32%. Strange. And it showed, okay, so the fuel trims are not going to be valid now because the system was in open loop fault. So I can't tell what the computer was trying to do with the fuel delivery, because obviously in open loop it doesn't correct for fuel delivery, in my opinion. Distance since the DTC is cleared, 3,300 kilometers. Well, I'm going to save this freeze frame for future reference, and then we'll look at mode 6 data. So here's a list of the mode 6 data, and it does have misfires on cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So let's do them in order here. And obviously I haven't cleared the codes because that would wipe out this mode 6 accumulated data. So that misfired 5 times. Misfire on cylinder 2. This is the one that I think I had a recording of. Last 10 drive cycles, 343 times. So cylinder 2 could be an issue. Misfire on cylinder 3. Last 10 drive cycles, 9 misfires. Current drive cycle, 3 misfires. Misfire on cylinder 4. $70. Cylinder 5. $0. Cylinder 6. 0. Cylinder 7. 0. And cylinder 8. 0. So, number 2 and 3, I think, were the bad ones. 343 on cylinder number 2. 3 had some misfires. It's starting to look like there was misfires reported all on the same bank. So cylinders 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all on the same bank. 5, 6, 7, 8 are on the other bank, as far as I know, but I'm going to double check that. So here's a recording of the current codes. So cylinder 2 and cylinder 4, as well as a random misfire. And when it was here in June, it was cylinder number 2. And I did replace a starter on this vehicle at another time. I have to check my records. I didn't update the information in the scan here, but I'm pretty sure I changed coil number 2 and plugs. So I'm going to look at that. So here's what I did back in June. It had a report of a misfire on number 2 coil, or number 2 cylinder, and it seemed to isolate it to number 2. I ended up changing the number 2 coil and putting a set of iridium spark plugs in it. So that was at 190,000 on it. I haven't checked the mileage right now, but that was back in June, so it's several months ago. And it appears to be misfiring on all of the cylinders on the bank 1. And none of the cylinders on bank 2. So I'm wondering now if we might have a restricted cat or a fuel trim problem. Now, considering most of the misfires were counted when the engine was hot, the oxygen sensors would have been working. It does have an O2 sensor negative current control circuit open, bank 1. So if that O2 sensor misreports, say, a rich condition, that would cause the computer to remove fuel delivery from all of the cylinders on bank 1 and potentially cause a lean misfire. Now, misfire detected during the first 1,000 revolutions should not be due to an O2 sensor, though, because the O2 sensors aren't working at that point, and it should be an open loop. I think what we're going to do is we're going to recommend replacement of this bank 1 O2 sensor, bank 1 sensor 1 O2 sensor, reset the fuel trims, but while I have the sensor out, I'm going to check for excessive back pressure in the exhaust. So after reviewing the freeze frame data, mode 6 data, all the cylinders on bank 1 reported misfires over the last 10 drive cycles. None of the cylinders on bank 2 reported misfires. Looking at the current data, I see a couple of anomalies here. It's been running for 21 minutes. And it's in open loop. And the reason why it's in open loop is that bank 1 sensor 1 oxygen sensor has a heater fault code. So it appears that it's in open loop due to that. So I can't evaluate the fuel trim here because it's in open loop. So again, it's looking like we need to change that forward oxygen sensor and then reevaluate the engine operation. But I'm also going to check exhaust back pressure while I have that forward oxygen sensor removed, just because it would be convenient to do it at that time. It could be a restricted cat causing exhaust back pressure to build up and acting like an EGR on bank 1. We'll see. So I cleared the codes, and that's allowed it to go back into closed loop, but in a fault situation. Just looking at that bank 1 oxygen sensor, it's O2 impedance expressed as a voltage. It says 5 volts on bank 1, and the other one on the other side is 1. Current from the sensor is 0, but yet the other sensor is switching. Trim resistance looks the same. The heater doesn't work, so that's a problem. Short-term field trim on bank 2 is at negative 15%. Let's see what it is on bank 1. Short term is at negative 17 and negative 17. That's interesting. Well, I think we're going to change out that sensor like I suggested and go from here. So I was right. Bank 1 is on the passenger side, right hand side of the engine, and the cylinders are number 1, 2, 3, 4. So all 4 cylinders on this bank are reporting a misfire. It has a defective oxygen sensor on this bank, so let's have a look at where that oxygen sensor lives. So there is bank 1 sensor 2. Bank 1 sensor 1 is up there. Why couldn't it be on this side where there's a little bit more room? Oh well. Some guys get all the gravy work. So I've got the forward oxygen sensor removed. It was kind of a challenge, especially the connector way up here on top of that harness, clipped into the top of the harness. And I've got a fitting installed in there and a pressure gauge. So we're going to start it and check, see what kind of exhaust back pressure it's got at an idle and a fast idle. So we're about to start this thing. Got shakes this morning, I need a coffee. Typically the spec is, let's get the glare off of here. Typically the spec is less than 1 psi at an idle, which it is, but less than 2 psi at 2500 RPM. So there's 2500 RPM and you got 5 psi. So we definitely have an exhaust restriction in that catalyst. I might want to verify this with another gauge just to be sure. I just bought this gauge the other day. I can feel it missing right now as we speak. I suppose if I take that pressure gauge out of there and the misfire is gone, that would be another suggestion. So I've cleared the codes, and that's reset the misfire counters now. And here's cylinders 1, 2, 3, and 4, current drive cycle, and 5, 6, 7, 8 current drive cycle, and then over the last 10 drive cycles. So I'm going to start this vehicle now with no oxygen sensor in that forward oxygen sensor hole. So that should allow the engine to breathe correctly, and I'm hoping these misfires will not show up. So I'm going to fire it up. Still counted 1, 9, 1, 2, but definitely not as bad as when the oxygen sensor was in there. I'm going to repeat the test with the O2 sensor plug in the hole.